Hi everybody. Welcome to this seminar on vulnerable migrants in Bergen. And today we're talking about the informal sector. And we're wondering, what if you were working in the informal sector and where there's no social security and suddenly your job disappears overnight? Or if your only source of income was collecting bottles on the street that other people are left behind, but suddenly there were no bottles anymore. Or perhaps your only reliable source of income is prostitution. It's not a secret that any crisis, let it be financial, health-related, or even war, it hits the most vulnerable first. And the examples of collecting bottles or perhaps even prostitution might sound like examples that do not happen in Norway, let alone Europe, but they are actually taken from our own human rights city in Bergen. And this seminar will then address and discuss the situation of migrants working in the informal sector in Bergen. What happened to this group when we closed down in March 2020? And where are these individuals now? How are they doing? And my name is Marianne Lande-Sudall. I'm moderating this seminar today. And with me, I have a good panel I'll introduce to you shortly. But first, I want to say that this seminar is part of a seminar series on Bergen as a human rights city. And it's a collaboration between the Center for Law and Social Transformation, Bergen Global, Kirkens Bymisjon, Church City Mission, Stiftelsen, and CMI. So if you're interested in more events like this, you can head over to Law Transforms Facebook page or web page to see more. But before we start, I'd like to show you a short video clip so we all get a clear idea of who we are talking about. So have a look at this.
Luminita no passa det.
Det har vært mange dager. Han har ikke fått nok penger for å shoppe mat. Han sier at folk virker litt redd for ham nå. At det er mange som går rundt og så på en måte prøver ikke å få kontakt med ham.
Yes. So this was just a very, very short video clip from the emergency shelter in Bergen, which is just one of the many examples, of course, of migrants that found corona restrictions extremely tough. And migrants in the informal sector, which this seminar is focusing on, is a very big and complex group. Some of these individuals that we're talking about are very visible, such as perhaps the people you could argue using the emergency shelter. They're often the people that you see also collecting bottles in town or begging on the streets. While other groups in the informal sector, they're obviously trying to keep a much lower profile. And that could be examples such as people working with selling sex, but it can also be individuals that do not know that they're even working in the informal sector. That could be the building industry, or it could be in the waitressing or cooking. Yeah, there are many different examples of this group. But with me here today, I have a good panel, and let me introduce you the panel first. So if you can turn on your cameras, I have Sølve Sætre from Bergen Municipality. He is head of the section of the Department of Culture, Diversity and Equality. I have Kristine Moskvil Thorsen from the City Church Mission, Kirkens Bymisjon, leading the unit on immigration. Haugebø from Bergen Municipality, he's the head of section in the Department of Social Affairs, Housing and Local Development. And we have Luminita from the Adina Stiftelsen, based in Romania. So welcome to all of you. I think this will be a very interesting chat. Let me just say that if you have any questions throughout this session, please just post it in the chat and we'll address those questions at the end. But I want to start with you, Luminita, first. You are based in Romania, while we are all sitting our respective home offices here in Bergen. And based on the information that Kirkens Bymisjon have, we see that there many or a large proportion of the people using the emergency shelter, they come from Romania. And I'm curious to hear why is that a big group here in Bergen? Yeah, why do we have so many people from Romania at these emergency shelters?
Hello, first of all, and I think that the COVID crisis aggravated a bit the phenomenon of poverty in Romania, a bit more actually. And the people who previously faced poverty are now even more vulnerable. And as you know, in Romania, the living conditions are quite difficult, especially in the rural area, where we can talk about most than half of population living in bad conditions. For example, don't have a toilet or a bathroom in their house, or not even current water source. So sometimes the conditions they find in the shelters or where they are living in Norway, in Bergen, and where they work are much better that they have home. So this is maybe one of the reasons. Also, there are reasons related to the fact that most of the ones who come in Norway don't know how to get a job in Romania. They don't have the qualification they need in order to have a job. They don't know how to make a CV, a resume, in order to apply for a job. And for the one who manage, they are not happy with the salary they receive in Romania. So working in a different country and earn more money that they have in Romania, it's like a mirage, and they come to work there, leaving home the family and the children.
Thanks, and we'll get back to that, because we do see that there are quite a few families, I think what you've explained, from rural communities that have their parents working abroad. But how has this pandemic, this ongoing pandemic, affected families and individuals in rural communities where you work and the Adina Stiftelsen work?
Unfortunately, the map of COVID incidents in Romania is getting to be redder. And even we have strict regulations related to the public and private events. Even the restaurants or the cinema, for example, have very low available places. People are still going out in the traditional market. They go to the shopping centers. They are crowded in the public transportation. So it's a risk, and also it's a problem related to the fact that they wear masks, for example, sometimes or only for avoiding to don't get a penalty. They don't wear the mask in the proper way, and they buy some fashionable mask, and this is not really good because this is not hygienical. We have the schools open for preschoolers. We have the primary pupils in regular classes, and the one who graduating years in secondary and high school are also in physically at school. The university offer courses online, and of course for rural area where are living the poorest population, it's a problem for them in order to access the proper education. It's quite impossible sometimes to participate to online classes. And also it's a big problem related to the hospitals that now are overwhelmed. And last week we had news about people who died in the isolator of the emergency department in the hospital of Craiova because they didn't have vacant places in the COVID department. So there are situations when people are at the limit in many ways.
And so what you're saying is that there is some sort of a class difference in a way, certainly in terms of education, where kids are homeschooled and some children don't have access to facilities to do proper homeschooling?
Yes, the gap between rural area and the urban area, it's even bigger. There was always a gap because the children from rural area are the risk to drop out school is double comparing with the urban area. But now with the context of pandemic, it's even difficult for them to follow up the curriculum in the schools. And we have to admit that Romanian schools have a very competitional style. So in the academical requests are very high, and sometimes the children are just separated in smart children or stupid children. And for the ones who don't have the tools and facilities to participate in the right way to the classes, it's even more difficult.
We'll get back to you, Luminita, because we need to tap into this migration challenge that you grasp with. But first, Kristine, Moskvil Thorsen, you are the head of the migration unit at Kirkens Bymisjon. You know a little bit more about the situation here in Bergen. How has the pandemic affected? Let's first talk about the street workers, the people that we saw in this video clip. How has this pandemic affected that group?
The situation for people living in the margins have obviously just deteriorated, I would say, as a general observation. So if you're already living on the streets or with very little income, this situation has become much worse for many people. And you've already mentioned the people living in our emergency shelter. The interesting thing, though, is that the number of guests at our shelter has reduced considerably. Normally, we have space for more than 30 guests on an average night, and lately the number has reduced to just a handful of people. And going back, probably we'll talk about this later when we talk about some of the efforts from the municipality, but part of that was also assisting a number of these individuals to go home to their home countries in the first phase of the pandemic, because we foresaw that the situation would be worse and that this would make it very difficult for them to make an income at all, because we have to remember that these are people who are here primarily to work. They are here as part of the regulations as EEA citizens, where you can get 3 months of residence permits here and you can work. However, obviously there is not so much work, and very often they end up in situations as you described in the first place, where they live from begging, collecting bottles, maybe some other random work opportunities will come along their way. What we see, though, is that in the first phase of the pandemic, there was hardly any income at all. The earnings were so low, and as we saw from the clip, there is hardly any money to be made. So normally we would also charge like a little symbolic amount to stay the night in the shelter, and we've stopped that for this past year now, because we don't see that as, people are, not making money at this point, to put it that way. And then you're asking about like the situation in general. You mentioned in the introduction that there are also other groups here that are living kind of in these margins, and through a lot of our outreach work on the streets, we meet people who perhaps live from selling sex, and part of that work, that market is on the streets, and part of it is done from home. And I would say that generally most of these people have a migrant background, and some of them can also be traced back to some sort of as victims of trafficking, but that's not the majority of these people. And again, I have to underline, since we talk about it here, the choice of people here is when you choose that form of income, it's because you don't have many other options for making an income. This is in their own experience. And so in this situation, many of these people have felt that, the market shrunk a lot during this time, and also a lot of it has perhaps become more hidden. And so we've found through our outreach and through our communication with these groups that the situation is particularly hard, perhaps, for this group of people, where they can't pay for their basic needs. Many of them have some sort of a rental place that they now may not be able to pay for. And I understand that we will be talking a bit about risk-taking a bit later in this seminar, and how that can affect people in that. So I would say that generally, you're asking whether this, the pandemic has made the situation worse for people, and the answer is yes, it's more difficult for people at the moment. And that, again, like some of these efforts and these offers or whatever that we have also partly in partnership with public services is the only way for people to survive at this point. And I also have to say that for many people who would have wanted to go home, like they will go back to a situation that Luminita is describing, which for many people is experienced as even worse, and also with coming back without having earned any or saved up any earnings during this phase while they've left their families behind is also very difficult for people. So yeah, it's short picture of some of the groups that we work with.
And we'll get back to the different groups also. I'm curious, you did mention that in March we were returning quite a large group of EEA citizens, voluntary, those that wanted to go home were assisted to return home. And Mats Haugebø, Bergen Municipality, you were involved in this, weren't you? How come why did the municipality assist with voluntary return?
I like to say, why not? No, but we have a very close dialogue with Kristine, Kirkens, Bymisjon, and the other organizations working with the people living in the margins of society. And in March, everything closed down. It was just not for this group. The social services closed the door. We had the services to drug addicts closed. Everybody was afraid. Everybody closed. We didn't know what to do. We didn't have equipment. So I guess it was a shock for us and all those getting services. So one of the first things we saw was that we had to help this group, especially because they told us the town was empty. You went out to the street, there was no one there. So the people that they would earn money from wasn't there anymore. So we would rather help them to get home again, to a country where they speak their language and where they know around better than an empty city. So we talked with the social services and said we would process easily these applications for going home. It was of course voluntarily, but as we saw it, many came and wanted to go home. This had continued all year. I think all the way to the month of May, we sent people home, and after a while it was a problem with the flights and the communication, of course, getting home. But we have been there that we finance home going all the time. But as she said, now there's very few left, just a handful in this category. Yes.
So it was the uncertainty in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess like the rest of Europe, no one did know what will happen. Will it be over in a month or 2 or 3? We're still sitting like we are, so it's kind of hard for many groups. I think we are better now with the public services. We have reopened many of them, and we try to keep them open, even though we have more coming, a different kind of COVID-19. We keep open, and we have meetings all the time with the organizations about other rooms to have as shelters as the church rooms, and food, getting out food to where they are, and so on. So I think we're better now than March last year, because then we were not good at all, but no one was.
No, that's right. I'm also curious to hear, because obviously there's this stigma attached to migrants often, being like dirty or full of disease, or there's something there that's I think been playing on people's mind a little bit also. And Sølve, Sætre from Bergen Municipality, you work a little bit with integration, and you worked a lot with this translating videos, for example, about Corona. Does this stigma play a role do you feel like the stigma plays a role in the city, and do you think it played a role in returning migrants, EEA citizens?
Well, certainly many of the migrant groups and the groups that are vulnerable, they also feel vulnerable themselves, and they certainly feel singled out and stigmatized when we talk about that certain groups are overrepresented in number of COVID cases. I'm not sure if this particularly is the case for these set of migrants that we are discussing today, but certainly other minority groups like the Somali minority in Bergen and other groups, whether that played a role in the assisted returns of this group last year, I'm not sure. Obviously, as you said, the market for the services that they were offering to the people in Bergen kind of disappeared. So I guess this was by kind of a mutual interest that they returned. But these issues regarding rumors or negative attention concerning minority groups and Corona is something that we are concerned with, and that we are cooperating with the police that are working on hate crime constantly on this issue. So this is a real issue. I'm not sure if, however, that the group that we are discussing today would be the most affected by this, because at the moment it is a rather small group in the city, and also the general population in Bergen, they venture less into the city center at this point. I mean, we are sitting in our homes, so they are not as visible as they were.
That's right. Kristine,
I
yeah.
add some comments on that, because I think that in the first phase of the pandemic, that was something that we were all quite concerned about, and that we also discussed, you know, this kind of public threat. People living on the streets are moving, there is higher, they're more mobile than the rest of us. And so we know that this virus is traveling fast. So that was a real threat in the beginning, or a worry in the beginning, that that would aid the distribution of the virus. However, we've seen, and we've all been quite stunned by that, that we've hardly had any incidents in any of these environments, neither here or in Oslo or in the other big cities, which is kind of strange to us. So that's one comment I wanted to add. And the other comment that I really wanted to add is that, yes, as for stigmatization of certain groups, I would really want to emphasize that particularly the group of people selling sex is someone who've felt this stigmatization very strongly. And we know that in Oslo, there's also been, you know, a number of police operations where people have been unfairly arrested, detained, and even, you know, deported based on this idea that they are, you know, as we saw in the media, they were labeled as these contagion bombs, or, you know, a threat to public health. And so this is something that they felt very strongly. And that I have to say, though, that these type of police operations, we haven't had any reports on that here in Bergen. And so we don't think that has happened here, but the fear that this might happen is something that is very much experienced. And we also experience that they are, just as you were saying, Sølve, in the beginning here, that they're just as concerned about not getting ill as the rest of us. And if you're living out of your body, either because you're walking miles a day collecting bottles, or you need your body to be in shape in order to make an income, you don't want to get ill, basically. So our experience is that the need for, you know, translated information, adjusted, you know, correct information about what is the measures needed to stay safe and stay healthy is something that is very much a need also in this group. Although you're right, Sølve, that the number of people are not so great, but it's still some of the same elements play into the picture here. Yeah. Mm.
And what about, you're saying that so many people, so many EEA citizens left, and certainly the group that we're talking about here left in March till May. But have we seen an increase of this group again? I don't know whether you know anything about that, Mats or Sølve, based on what you've seen.
Kristine is the one we usually ask about that.
Kristine, has there been an increase?
There has been fluctuations, I would say. There was a slight return of some individuals over the summer when things were, you know, we were all hoping for better days. And then again, gradual decrease over the fall. What we have seen, though, is, I would say lately, it's maybe too early to call it a trend, but we have seen we've gotten some inquiries from people who aren't normally would say, like the typical guest example in the emergency shelter, where they might actually have had a more closer connection to the labor market but because of the situation, they might have lost their work. They might come from other countries in the EEA area. And so just, you know, the last 2 weeks now, we've had inquiries from people saying, you know, can we come and stay here? We used to work here and there in construction or in other type of work, and we don't anymore. We're not able to pay for our rent anymore, which is something quite new lately, and that the number of people, particularly Romanian citizens, are at this moment very few in Bergen, slightly higher in the other cities.
Oh, that's interesting. And now, Sølve, I want to challenge you a little bit, because I have seen that you've been to Romania. And I'm wondering, just based on your experience, what you've seen or what you experienced, like, what does that mean for those that come to Bergen? Like, does it mean, what kind of responsibility should Bergen municipality take for these groups?
I mean, I think I would like to say that I think cities in many ways are, we see these people in a different way than the national governments, and often not only Bergen but also colleagues from cities in other parts of Europe. Maybe we want to do more for this group, but we are working within, you know, the limitations and the constraints of the national legislation. I mean, you know, when we are talking about working with undocumented migrants or also the EEA group, and I think this is maybe also what has inspired the city of Bergen to cooperate with cities and organizations in Romania, and currently we are involved in a twinning project with the city of Cluj, where they are providing housing for the Roma minority in the city that are currently residing in abysmal conditions in the outskirts of the city, and we are, you know, they are working to reintegrate them in neighborhoods in the city, and we as a city and our services, we are cooperating with them. But from my experience going to Romania, I mean, I do see that there are, you know, obviously, you know, many challenges. Certainly for the Roma minority, there's a lot of discrimination and racism. That's without a doubt, and there's outright poverty. So you do understand the motivation for these people to come to even a remote place as Bergen to look for an income.
And I'm curious then to know, Mats, because Sølve mentioned it, that as a municipality and as a city, you work within certain rules and regulations, right? And then Bergen also decided to become a human rights city in 2018. What does that then mean? Does it have any added value, do you think? Like, does it change anything in your experience? Or is it just something nice to add on to Bergen as a name?
I think that's a Sølve question. He works with the plans, working with that. I don't think in Bergen that we do anything because it's just nice. We have politicians that are really involved in the plans we are making, and they really want to make a difference. As I know, the politicians that's ruling in Bergen now, they really want to make a difference. They really want to decide making plans that are real and that has a real content that makes a difference for the people. Really, maybe Sølve can add some more there.
Yeah, well, I agree with Mats that, you know, that there's a real commitment to this among the political leaders in the city, and currently we are working on a report. Well, the research institute FAFO, they are now in the finishing stages of a report on the situation for undocumented migrants in the big cities in Norway, and this is an initiative from Bergen. And what we are looking for is what is the room for action for us as a city to improve the situation for this group. So this is we want to know more about the group in Norway, and also what we as cities can do. And also we also want to know a bit more who they are and what kind of how many people are there in these groups, because it's a bit difficult for us to have an overview. Yes, I will invite you all to a seminar in a couple of months to learn more about the findings in this report. I think that would be interesting.
That'd be interesting. Thank you. Kristine, did you have anything?
Well, it was just a comment on that group, because the undocumented migrants, that it's not necessarily part of the EEA group, but it's still part of maybe the informal sector, if that's more of the headline of the overall headline for this seminar, because we meet them also in our health center for undocumented migrants. And I just want to emphasize that we too, in working in the ideal sector or as a voluntary organization, do experience that the municipality are kind of real in their commitments. And I wanted to use that example of undocumented migrants, because during this pandemic, it was during the pandemic that the municipality actually introduced a position as a doctor with, with the with the explicit group of patients being undocumented migrants, and that was the first time that had happened. That's that normally they don't have access to the fastlege, to the regular doctors, and that's why they come to our center. And during this phase, we were able to establish a relationship that where doctors in the public sector would accept these patients. So I can also see that these commitments are linked to actions, but of course we have to push on. So I'm excited about that report too, Sølve.
That'd be good. And we need to return. We need to return to Romania, but before that, I'm just so what you're saying is that yes, the politicians in Bergen are engaged in being a human rights city. It's something they're passionate about, but has there been any actual outcome? Did you know? Can you pinpoint down things that have been done as a result of being a human rights city, Mats?
It's a big question. Through all the departments in the city, we have worked out crisis plans, and there have been I don't know what bystyresak is, cases to the city council, where they have been giving fundings to families with no income to set up extra tiltak, extra, what you call it? I don't know.
Measures.
Extra measures for the people living in the margins, with extra fundings to the organizations working with these. So there are, I don't know how much, but 10-15 million have been granted to make an extra effort to all these groups. And then I'm speaking from psychiatry, the drug addicts, social welfare, this group we are talking about, because there's a big variety of groups that have been suffering in this situation, that the city council want to make an effort to help, really. And there's a dialogue with the government, national government, about these fundings and how it can do better, really. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. I know you hadn't prepared for that question, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot there. That's good. But now, Luminita, I want to go back a little bit to you first, because when people experience a crisis, it does something to people's risk-taking also. Have you seen, in your experience, like what have you seen in terms of risk-taking now during the pandemic among families perhaps that struggle the most?
During the pandemic, it was very difficult, and it is very difficult for the families we work with. as I said earlier, it's difficult to cover their daily life expenses. It's very difficult to cover the needs of the children, especially related to the education. And even the schools are in a bad situation, and for teachers also was quite difficult to adapt to the new condition, to the pandemic condition, and working online. Some of the parents were obliged due to the crisis to come back home, so their incomes are even lower than it was before. And also for the one who are living in Romania, we had situations when companies were closed or closed during a couple months, and they receive a smaller income. So it was very, and it is still very difficult for the people to handle the situation. And here it's about how the Romanian authorities are intervene, and also the NGOs. And it's nice to, and we were glad to see that Romanian starts to be more solidar. This is something that didn't happen during the last decades, but during the last years, we noticed that solidarity started to coming back somehow to our society, and the one who are in a better situation started to think to the one who are in difficult situation and support them.
That's quite nice to hear. Kristine, what have we seen here in Bergen in terms of risk taking? Because the assumption is obviously that if there isn't a crisis, you have to just try your best to still generate an income, for example, and that might imply higher risks. Is that correct?
Well, I guess it's a fair assumption that you know, if you're desperate, you're willing to, go further in order to take care of what is most important to you. And for most people, that is your life and your family and your children. And so that goes for most people, I would say, from my experience. And for people who are, again, living in the informal, like in the world that we don't really see so much, they're then perhaps willing to do things that they are normally would not feel comfortable about. And as for the group of people that I mentioned earlier, living from selling sex, for example, we hear of situations where also perhaps people that they have slightly controlling, unhealthy relationships to will take advantage of them in a vulnerable situation. So that, for example, landlords, or in a rental situation, they might have to pay other services than just monetary for their obligations. And so, yes, I would definitely say that. And also, as for exposing themselves to higher risk, as for COVID, that's also the case, so that while as the rest of us could stay safely in our home offices or whatever, these measures are kind of luxurious for some of them. And I have to say, as for the emergency shelter, that was one of our, main worries in the beginning, because our emergency shelter is a huge, it's a hall, it's the sovesal, it's and you sleep less than a meter next to the bed next to you. And so one of the infection control measures that we had to do was to reduce the number of available beds, obviously, in order to also protect our staff in that situation. So but again, then that, then we would be in that dilemma of having potentially have to reject certain people at the door because we didn't have enough beds in order to keep safe for those who were there. We have luckily not been, have not come in that situation up until now. But yes, I would say that the answer on the overall is that if you're in a very dire situation and desperate to make a living, to provide for your family, then perhaps you would go further than you would otherwise.
Mm. And we also know that their migrant groups have on a European level a higher rate of even COVID cases than perhaps the, what would you call it, the native population. And Sølve, I know you've done a little bit of work on this. And what kind of role and support should Bergen Municipality offer to these groups that are more exposed to COVID?
Well, as Kristine said, we do not have many examples of people, within the group we're discussing today that have been infected and certainly become ill, that we know of. What we do have in Bergen, we have a hotel where people can stay to be isolated, because of course it's very important that people that are infected with the virus do not move around in the society and meet a lot of people. But also we have done a lot of work with minority communities for the prevention of the virus. We have handed out protection equipment. We have translated information into many languages, also Romanian. So, this is an issue that is very important for us, because we see that, nationally, around half of the people that are infected have a minority background. Of course, we are mainly talking about other nationalities than European ones, but for instance, Polish migrants are overrepresented. And we have also had cases with the Polish minority community, reports from within this group that they are kind of forced by the employers to work in various locations. And this happened even after Christmas. We had this information. We are working very closely with the NGO Caritas at the moment. Also within the Polish communities, we've hired health workers with a Polish background to do information work in this community, and also that information kind of floats better in this community. So we are working on many projects in this area, and I also think one of the reasons why it has gone fairly well in Bergen is that we have this large test station in the main square in the city center, where you can have drop-in appointments and have a COVID test for free. I think that's been a very good measure of reaching out to absolutely everybody, including the most vulnerable groups.
Absolutely. Now, if you are listening or watching, have any questions, please feel free to add it in the chat, because we're approaching the end. Can
I give a comment on Sølve's point about the information part, because I think that goes for all of these groups we're talking about, that the situation in general is very difficult to have an overview of, that we know even from our own perspective, that it's hard to follow regulations this way or that way. And for people who also speak different languages and that maybe also have alternative media or alternative sources of information coming from home countries, it's to orient themselves in that landscape is sometimes difficult. And I'd say that this very big focus on that here in Bergen, on translating information, reaching out to people in different languages, updating the information has been important. And again, from our experience, being out to reach, being there practically on the streets or in the different environments, working with the groups, this is something that is something to perhaps be learned from to another situation, and that we also see is being talked about on a national level, that we have to be earlier out there with information in the different languages. So just to underline your point, Sølve.
Absolutely, and also we see that regulation, it changes all the time, and updating is just as important, I think, as having it there in the first place. So very clear. Luminita, in Romania, you've seen that many of the children that you work with, they don't have their parents at home because they've gone abroad to work. May not be Norway, could be other countries as well. What does that do to the rural and not rural? What does that do to the Romanian community?
Unfortunately, having parents who work abroad, it's just a solution for short term to have a better life, to live a bit better. But on long term, there are very bad effects. And the specialists talk about the lost generation in Romania, and they are referring to the children that are born abroad. And sometimes they forget about the children that are left behind in the country. And we are now in the situation to have like 900,000 youths, nor in education, employment or training, and like 600,000 children who are born abroad. So it's a huge number. It's a huge number comparing with the Romanian population. And having parents who work abroad is sometimes bad also because the children are living home with the grandparents. They are living home with somebody from the family, like uncles and aunts, and being busy to making money. Sometimes the parents are buying somehow the time they don't spend with their children, and giving to their children the smartphone or computer, or I don't know, like a PlayStation, or if they are over 18 years, a car, a bad car, but a car. And they don't think to the bad effects that these material assets are affecting their children's life. We are in the situation when almost half of our youngsters are functional illiterate. They are not able to have critical thinking. They are not able to they are not able to make a resume, to find a job. They don't have goals. So it's a sad situation. It's a sad situation. And as I say, the school system, it's promoting the competition. So sometimes they are just waiting and have the support from their parents. They are waiting the money that come from abroad, and they don't do that much with their lives. And yeah, here we are, and we are developing programs in order to prevent bad behaviors.
So what would your challenge be? Now you have Bergen Municipality and Kirkens Bymisjon here. What could we do in order to assist local communities in Romania, as an example?
I think we are privileged. We are in a fortunate situation because we have Norwegian partners since we were established as an NGO. And during the last years, we managed to develop and implement projects, international project with the support of Adina Stiftelsen Bergen and also of Kirkens Bymisjon Bergen. And we started to learn, and we tested and implemented some few concepts that are running very well in City Mission in Bergen. And during 2014, 2016, through one type of project, we learned about open kindergarten and about Home Start. And these concepts are running very well since then in our organization, and we started to develop around the area. And we just started a new project on EA grants and Norwegian grants. It's called From Pupil to Employee, Advocacy and Training for Youth and Women at Risk in Dolge County. And City Mission, it's one of the partners from donor states. And we will supplement the existing program, and we address the problem of inactivity of youngsters and women. We talk about youngsters from 13 years old up to 24, and young women over 16 years old. We will work during the next 2 years in order to learn how to implement V13 and EMPO, and having this as regular projects and programs in our organization.
Mm-hmm. Nice to hear. It's good to hear that you can collaborate across borders, even during a pandemic. We need to round up here. I don't see there are any questions, but finally, Sølve, what do you take from this pandemic and your work on migrants and perhaps certainly like more vulnerable groups? What lessons can we take from this and bring with us in the future?
Yeah, a lot of lessons. I mean, there's a lot of research going on at the moment regarding our work with minority communities and the COVID crisis. Of course, it shows that there's a gap in the health services and health challenges to minority and majority population. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the figures from Oslo are astonishing, especially, but also from Bergen. Regarding the rate of infections in the minority and majority population. So this will be a big lesson for us, and we learn a lot. And there are many meetings going on constantly between the cities and the health authorities, and also later today there will be a meeting with the big cities and the Minister of Integration regarding this issue. So this really is it's an important question, and we are learning as we're speaking. So yes. I can also see in the chat there was a question from Sebastian. Good to hear from you, Sebastian. And as I said earlier, we have a cooperation with. It's a question about the cooperation with the partners in Romania. And I think what Sebastian is asking is whether we have any plans to have a cooperation with a part of Romania where many of the migrants that are residing in Bergen, where they come from. Actually, we've had 2 projects with partners in Romania, and to be honest, we focused more on the finding good partners and good projects than identifying where in Romania they are actually from. So currently, we are involved in a very good project in Cluj, as I said, and I think that's where we're going to be, at least for the time being. But I think it's a very good idea what Sebastian is suggesting regarding these twinning projects, and many cities in Europe do that successfully. And also at the very end, thank you. And also I'm very impressed with the Adina Foundation and what they are doing in Romania. I'm familiar with the projects, and I think this is an excellent way of working, and the way they are twinning also with the city church mission. I think it's excellent. So great. So thank you, and it's been very interesting to listen to Luminita as well. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sølve. And I think we'll finish it there. Thank you very much, Kristine, Luminita, and Sølve. And Mats had to go a bit earlier, but thank you to Mats also. And thank you for watching this, and I hope to see you at the next seminar. Thank you. Bye-bye.